Good afternoon, good afternoon. We're bringing to order the Subcommittee for Education and Economic Development, this budget hearing to order. Good afternoon. We will be beginning with the University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, and we will have a presentation from our esteemed budget analyst, Sarah Baker.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Exhibit 1 on page 4, which shows the changes in fall enrollment. For the first time since fall 2012, enrollment decreased by 313 students due to new graduate students declining by 311. And this decrease was related to 4 programs. Decline in medical cannabis and cybersecurity law are related to the high demand when they were first offered, but now that they have been offered for a while, enrollment is leveling off. Enrollment declines in the Masters of Social Work and Pharmacy Professional Doctorate, or PharmD, mirrors national trends of decreased demand and increased competition from recently created programs at competing institutions. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows enrollment in medical-related professional programs. Despite a slight decrease of 55 students in 22, the demand at all levels for nursing programs remains strong. Increase in the pharmacy program is due to the medical cannabis program, which started in 2019, while enrollment in the PharmD program has steadily declined since 2018. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows the number of medical-related professional graduates. Overall, nursing degrees account for over 60% of graduates, which reached its highest level in 2020 at 756 degrees. The decline in nursing degrees is mainly due to a decrease in the number of Masters in Science in Nursing. The number of PharmD awards has fallen 20.8% since 2020, reflecting declining enrollment. Turning to affordability on page 6, Exhibit 4 shows the cost of attendance by professional programs, which ranges from almost $50,000 for the Masters of Social Work to over $96,000 for the dental program. Now, UMB established affordability metrics to serve as a basis for setting tuition in its financial aid program, and they found that even with graduating with high levels of debts, the programs remain affordable to most students. Also, we note that geography impacts the accumulation of debt earnings and repayment, in that the lower salaries in underserved areas of the state make it less affordable for graduates to work there. So UMB is using institutional financial aid to create award packages to make it more affordable for low-income students. Exhibit 5 on page 9 shows the average debt by program, and you'll note that the dental graduates have the highest average debt of over $300,000. Moving on to the budget on page 11. Exhibit 6 shows budget changes for unrestricted funds by program areas for 22 and 23. Overall expenditures increased by $64.1 million, or 8.5%. A majority of these increase in spending across all programs is due to the 23 salary increases. I do note that $1.3 million of the increase in instruction is due to an increase in financial aid that was provided in the 23 supplemental budget number 4. The proposed budget is shown in Exhibit 7 on page 12. After adjusting the 23 and 24 budget, state funds increased by 11.5%. or by $37.9 million. In 24, general salary increases account for 64.7%, or about $24.5 million of the increase in state funds. Also, funds also include $1 million as mandated for the Empowering Joint Steering Committee. This leaves $14.9 million of state funding to be used to cover other current service costs or program enhancements. We asked the President to comment on how UMB plans to use the $14.9 million of state funds. Exhibit 8 on page 14 under revenues by source. You can see the pandemic impacted revenues in 2020 when revenues from educational activities, which includes the clinical practices, went from comprising 27% of revenues to 19%. But I note that the federal relief funding helped mitigate the loss of revenues, resulting only a slight decrease of total funds. Tuition and fees go from comprising 23% of revenues in 22 to 21% in 23, reflecting the decline in enrollment. And state funding accounts for an increasing portion of revenues, growing from 34% in 22 to 40% in 23, and this partly reflects the various general salary increases. I have one issue, and this is on page 16 of the Institute for Health Computing. So Empowering, in partnership with the University of Maryland Medical System, announced the establishment of the institution this past fall. Other collaborators include the universities at Shady Grove and UMBC. The Institute will incorporate technologies to study emerging diseases and help establish precision patient care to halt disease progression. For example, poorly controlled diabetes, high blood pressure, or early kidney disease can be identified by trending changes in lab tests in outpatients. This allows for more targeted interventions to prevent the progression of the disease. De-identified data from 1.8 million UMS patients, along with clinical research data from UMB, will provide the backbone for analytical analysis. And then the Institute will lease space until completion of lab and office space in North Bethesda in 2028. Montgomery County will provide $40 million, $15 million in the current year, and $5 million annually for 5 years. And they also secured $3 million in federal community project funding for the equipment. Empowering will be providing $25 million over the next 5 years. The recommendation is on page 17, and that is to see the USM overview for system-wide recommendations. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Are there any questions for our budget analysts? Seeing none, thank you so much for your time. At this time, we'd like to request President Jarrell and team to come forth. Great to see you today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us here. For the record, my name is Bruce Jarrell. I'm joined here by 2 colleagues, Dr. Dawn Rhodes, who's our Chief Financial Officer, and Dr. Roger Ward, who's Provost. Chair Smith, I want to thank you and your committee for allowing us to present before you and for your support of UMB, and of course thank Sarah Baker for her usual thoughtful analysis. And we are very grateful to the Governor and the General Assembly for their great support of this university. In the several minutes that follow, I'd like to give you a quick view of UMB and a taste of how we're utilizing our state funding, and thus hopefully you'll agree with us that our budget is justified. When I stop to look at UMB, I see our faculty, staff, and students with their sleeves rolled up and hard at work at our mission to improve the human condition. Yes, we train many of the state's professional health, law, and social workers, but we also aim to serve the needs of the City of Baltimore and the state of Maryland however and wherever we can. In terms of education, UMB educates many of Maryland's professional workforce, and our deans are very focused on addressing the shortage of providers, pay close attention to enrollment, and view education and community service as hand in hand. We train in the community where possible. We collaborate where possible. We take pride that 79% of our professional students are from the state of Maryland. They're in-state. And our graduation rate is very high, the lowest being 89% in nursing and 97% in the School of Medicine. So we have a very successful program. We have expanded our School of Nursing programs, particularly the Bachelor of Nursing program and the Nurse Practitioner. We now have a heavy presence at the universities at Shady Grove and represent the largest academic program at Shady Grove. We have a dual enrollment for nursing in every community college in this state. Our physician assistant program is at 40 students now. We hope to expand to 60 students. And we are also very actively engaged in training physicians, nurses, physician assistants, and others to become qualified, to become faculty, to teach in all programs in this state. For the Eastern Shore, we received a HRSA grant several years ago to develop a family medicine residency on the Mid-Shore, and we are hoping to make that a permanent program to provide more providers on the Eastern Shore. We're also collaborating with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore to place Maryland medical students on their campus for long periods of time. Our School of Dentistry has been very active in supporting Frederick Memorial Hospital and others around the state to offload their emergency room with dental emergencies. And at Shady Grove, we now have a large, beautifully equipped dental education program. We now have dental residencies training down there and hope to have students down there shortly. I'd like to point out to you one particular new PhD award program at the level of $13.7 million from the NIH, aimed at recruiting and training junior faculty from underrepresented groups in biomedical sciences. This is a collaboration with UMBC. So I hope you get the flavor of very strong clinical programs. I'd like to move to research. Our research has been and remains very strong. Last year, FY22, UMB received $654 million in extramural funding, grants, and contracts. This is money that funds our broad research, training, and service activities. For public universities with that magnitude of funding, that places us as the largest public research university in the Baltimore metro area. And now that the National Science Foundation has acknowledged that UMB and College Park, our strategic partner, should report together, you're looking at a combined research asset of over $1.3 billion. That puts us in the top 10 of all public universities in the United States. I don't mind telling you that's rarefied air, and I'm very proud to be in that air. So our research has never been stronger. And I just want to point out what's the value of this. It's not the dollar value. It's the impact that it has. So, for example, we competed for a DARPA grant just last year for $46.4 million, which we successfully received. It's a collaborative grant with a number of other universities to look at artificial blood, something very important to the health of the armed forces. It also allowed UMB to make international news when it comes to heart transplant, which many of you heard about last year. It's allowed us to create the program that Ms. Baker mentioned in her analysis of the Institute for Health Computing in Montgomery County. We're putting significant amount of our resources in it, the county's putting it in, and we have great expectations that that program will change how we deliver health care and how we identify people early in their disease so we can prevent their getting sick from the disease. And lastly, looking back at COVID, it was because of our very strong research foundation as an academic research institution that UMB was able to serve the state in many ways in helping to care for COVID, vaccinate, test, etc. Your strong state support makes that possible. It makes it possible that we're so competitive for these grants that we can form new businesses in our community and that we're innovative. And it's this kind of research, I don't mind telling you, that makes for better health care. That's how you improve the health of the state. Lastly, I want to mention service to Baltimore and the state, particularly through many collaborations. At UMB, we are pleased to call ourselves an anchor institution for Baltimore, and we take that very seriously. There are dozens of programs run by each of our 7 schools that enable us to serve in homes, classrooms, clinics, and schools around the city. We, of course, have concentrated our outreach in West Baltimore. They urgently need our attention and investment. So, for example, a couple of quick examples. Our School of Social Work's Positive School Center, which is a community-based family strengthening service, touched over 1,000 families last year. Our school also supports 30 Baltimore City public schools, providing regular training and coaching for 900 teachers and staff. Our law school has a program, the University of Maryland Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, which is a collaboration with UBALT, and is focused statewide to reach over 4,000 Maryland taxpayers to assist them with advice. Our Victims of Crime Center at UMB is a one-stop shop in Baltimore for wraparound services for victims of crime and their recovery. It served 272 Baltimore residents just last year. Our School of Medicine mental health program is in 25 schools and has had 12,000 mental health services and interventions with teachers, schools, and students. Even our police program, our police department is involved. We have a police athletic league for children in West Baltimore working to prevent juvenile crime. I've just touched on the many programs at UMB. I hope you get the picture that we are engaged both inside our 4 walls, as engaged in West Baltimore and engaged throughout the state. The analyst has requested me to comment on how UMB plans to use the $14.9 million of state funding. This funding was allocated for fringe benefit increases and statewide adjustments based upon Department of Budget and Management summary information. These are mandatory costs due to rate hikes in health insurance and other benefits provided to state employees. That concludes my presentation, Madam Chair. Questions?
Sorry. Hear me as well. Okay, great. We're in business. Are there any questions for President Gerald or the team? Oh, there you go. Vice Chair Solomon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Dr. Gerald, it's good to see you again. I just wanted to highlight the Institute for Health Computing. Obviously, I have a slightly parochial interest in that. Eventually, it will be in my district when we build the building, but was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I think the committee would benefit from hearing potentially what you all view as the economic impact for that corner of the state and the potential, once it's built out, for sort of the ecosystem of companies that may move in as well.
Thank you. Happy to do so. So this program will be a collaboration of 3 principal parties and 2 additional parties. The 3 principal parties are the University of Maryland, Baltimore, College Park, and the University of Maryland Medical System. And all 3 of those have highly complementary skills and information. The medical system has many, many patient records electronically, and a lot of expertise on how to use those to improve patient care. College Park has deep experience in terms of computing, high-end computing, and how you ask questions of large data sets to get meaningful answers. And of course, UMB has deep expertise in medical care and how to use these data in a way to improve health. The 2 others partners in this are the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, with deep expertise in cybersecurity, and the universities at Shady Grove, which is a key part of this program because, of course, we see students from around the state, but certainly USG, doing summer internships at this program, and President Pines and I have already set aside funds to allow those externships to happen. I think there are 2 key things that could come out of this that are relevant to all of us, but certainly Montgomery County. The first is we don't have a way right now to aggregate all this data into meaningful information. It requires research and study to figure out what questions we want to ask, and then it requires a way to visualize this data so that you can see a result or see that this might work. Why is that an advantage? I think as Ms. Baker mentioned, right now we treat people who get sick, and wouldn't it be a lot better to be able to look for certain things and patterns in sick and in well individuals, to be able to identify them before it becomes a problem, and to make interventions in lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. Now, three related things to that. We've already recruited the UMB and the College Park individuals to work with this. UMS person is already on board, so we have a full, we're ready to go with this in terms of the leadership. Second of all, the data is in very good shape at UMMS. We expect to be able to use it fairly quickly. We have already been contacted by a number of businesses who actually want to be there with us in the building because they see benefits to this. And lastly, we see intellectual property coming out of this, and we see the opportunity to develop new companies, to be entrepreneurial about this. So I'm going to certainly predict for you that Montgomery County will see new business development, and I hope the state of Maryland will see new state development as well. Does that get to your question?
Yeah, no, I thought that would be helpful for the committee to hear, and we really appreciate your partnership. I know that our county partners are thrilled about this as well, so look forward to seeing this come to fruition. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your time today. That concludes your budget hearing rather. Still got to get used to being in budget. The next budget item is Morgan State University, and we'll hear from budget analyst Kelly Norton.
Thank you. We're going to start on page 4. Exhibit 1 shows total undergraduate enrollment and category changes from fall 2017 to 2022. Total undergraduate enrollment increased by 575 students from fall 2021 through 2022. As is illustrated in the exhibit, first-time, full-time students experienced a decline of 4.1% after the historic enrollment in fall 2021, yet the population still remains higher than pre-2021 enrollment numbers. Exhibit 2 on page 5 documents the changes in undergraduate applications. As illustrated in the exhibit, the number of applications grew tremendously in fiscal 2022, totaling over 16,845. The yield rate of 15.4%, which is the number of students who actually enrolled from that total, was the lowest rate recorded from fiscal 2012 through 2022. The acceptance rate of 85% was also the second highest rate recorded over this period. DLS asks the President to discuss the retention strategies in place to ensure that recent large cohorts academically persist at the university and what has led to the recent increase in the acceptance rate. Exhibit 3 on page 6 provides a breakdown of enrollment trends by location. Continuing to reverse the trend of declining enrollment, in-state enrollment grew by 121 students in 2022. The international undergraduate student population has continued to fall from the 2017 high mark of 780 students to 153 in 2022. The out-of-state student population continues to increase, growing by 465 students in 2022. Out-of-state students now make up more than 38% of the undergraduate enrollment at the university. Moving to student performance, Exhibit 4 on page 7 provides the second and third year retention rates for first-time, full-time students. The second year retention rate had fallen in 2017 and 2018, but rebounded in 2019, totaling 73.5%. The second year retention rate dropped to 70% for the 2020 cohort. The third year retention rate reverses its steady decline and increased to 61% for the 2019 cohort. Exhibit 5 on page 8 provides the 4- and 6-year graduation rates for first-time, full-time students. As shown in Exhibit, the 4-year graduation rate has held steady at 28% for the 2016 and 2017 cohorts. The 6-year graduation rate decreased slightly by 0.9 percentage points, but is still the second highest in this period. Exhibit 6 on page 9 provides the 8-year graduation rate by Pell and non-Pell recipient status students. Both non-Pell and Pell recipient full-time transfer students were more likely to graduate within 8 years than full-time, first-time, and part-time transfer Pell and non-Pell recipient students. Pell and non-Pell eligible part-time transfer students graduated at the lowest rates. Exhibit 7 on page 10 shows the estimated cost of attendance versus the average net price for full-time in-state students by income level between fiscal 2019 through 2021. This exhibit shows that the average cost of attendance over these years was $24,447. However, the actual net price for students when aided was awarded averaged $16,272. In fiscal 2021, the average net price was $9,300 less than the cost of attendance. But this exhibit also shows is that the cost of attendance will vary depending on income level. For example, in fiscal 2021, it cost a student $12,349 with a family income of under $30,000, but $19,494 for a student with a family income of over $110,000. Exhibit 8 on page 11 shows the amount of institutional aid awarded and total dollar amount of awards provided by category. The amount of institutional aid awarded has increased $11.6 million between fiscal 2017 to fiscal 2022. Need-based aid totaled $19.3 million alone in fiscal 2022, which was a result of ongoing financial aid optimization models adopted by Morgan. The U.S. Department of Education recently began reporting the median debt for graduates by field of study in an effort to give students a better picture of outcomes at the program level. Exhibit 9 on page 12 illustrates that the median debt of students range from over $21,000 for accounting and civil engineering majors to $31,000 for psychology, business, and liberal arts majors. Registered nurses had the highest median earnings at $79,390. Moving to the budget, Exhibit 10 on page 13 provides the budget changes for unrestricted funds by program from fiscal 2022 to 2023. The largest dollar change was in instruction, which increased by $11.7 million, and spending on research also increased substantially, growing by $11.4 million. Moving to the federal stimulus funds, Exhibit 11 on page 16 provides an overall summary of the total funds that were allocated to Morgan through the various Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, or HERF, stimulus programs. In total, Morgan has received over $128 million in federal stimulus funds, of which $26.8 million was required to go directly to students in the form of emergency financial aid payments. Exhibit 12 on page 17 provides the overall distribution of allocated and planned HERF spending by Morgan from fiscal 2020 through 2023. Morgan has until June 30th to expend $27.8 million in ARPA funds. The funding will be used for air quality improvements in buildings, firewall protections, for remote learning, and emergency financial aid. The proposed fiscal 24 budget found in Exhibit 13 on page 17 includes a general fund increase of $21.6 million, $4.5 million in cost of living in merit increases, and $26.4 million in Chapter 41 of 2021 funds. In total, when excluding state pay-go funds, Morgan's total state fund allocation increases by $36.4 million, or 23.3% relative to the adjusted fiscal 2023 working appropriation. The items identified to be funded with this increased funding are shown on page 18. Exhibit 14 on page 19 provides a breakdown of unrestricted revenues by source and total unrestricted funds. The ratios for these levels remain roughly stable from fiscal 28 through 2020. In fiscal 2024, state funds account for 45% of unrestricted funds, and Morgan anticipates total unrestricted funds to grow substantially, increasing to $350 million in the 2024 allowance. The personnel data for the university is found on page 20, which identifies that as of December 31st, 2022, the university had over 109.5 positions vacant above the expected turnover amount, which can be attributed to the creation of 192 new positions in fiscal 2023. DLS asked the president to comment on the new positions and the progress being made to fill them. Moving to issues, which begins on page 21. The first covers the Maryland College of Osteopathic Medicine at Morgan. The medical school has begun the approval process with the Maryland Higher Education Commission for degree-granting institutions in Maryland. MDCOM will be a private for-profit medical school operating at a public university and anticipates charging $55,000 in tuition and fees for a total of $220,000 for a four-year program. Exhibit 15 on page 22 shows the four-year median costs of medical schools in academic year 2021 through 2022 for allopathic and osteopathic schools. An osteopathic school awards DOs, or Doctors of Osteopathic Medicine, and has a more holistic style of medical training focusing on the musculoskeletal system and environmental factors in health. And the more common medical school is an allopathic school. As you can see, private medical schools have higher median costs. High college costs inevitably lead to student debt. Exhibit 16 on page 23 shows the median debt of U.S. medical graduates in fiscal 2021. The graduates at private colleges had higher rates of median debt. Due to its presence at Morgan, NDCOM will likely have a high concentration of Black students, a population that has higher rates of school debt. The average Black college graduate owes $52,726 compared to the average white college graduate with $28,006. In calendar 2019, 74.7% of student loans held by Black graduates exceeded the original loan amount. And Black medical students have higher rates of student debt at 91% and a higher median debt of $230,000 than other racial groups. In addition to the likelihood of high debt due to its status as a private college, due to its not having reached accreditation yet, it won't receive that until it graduates its first class, leaving the students without the ability to receive federal student loans until it reaches accreditation, and they must rely on private loans instead. DLS asks the President to address what efforts, if any, will be taken not to burden students with higher than necessary student debt, particularly students who will enroll before accreditation. The second issue is on page 24 and covers the most recent Office of Legislative Audit's Fiscal Compliance Report. There were 4 report findings. The first was M. Morgan did not adequately monitor the vendor responsible for dispersing student funds to ensure the refunds were properly issued and unissued refunds were returned. The second finding was Morgan did not independently verify the propriety of adjustments to student room and board charges, certain of which were not processed in accordance with Morgan's policy. The next was Morgan did not procure certain goods and services in accordance with his policies and procedures and did not ensure related goods and services were received in amounts invoiced were proper. The President of Morgan should comment on what actions have been taken to address the findings of the September 2022 audit report. And the President should also specifically comment on what actions have been taken with regard to the audit's repeat findings and repeat recommendations. The DLS operating budget recommended actions are found on page 27. And due to the number of repeat audit findings contained in Morgan's most recent fiscal compliance audit by OLA, DLS recommends adding budget language restricting the funds in Morgan until OLA submits a report indicating that corrective action has been taken satisfactorily, addressing the repeat findings contained in its audit report and requests its committee narrative requesting a report on the new Center for Elimination of Educational Disparities. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that broad overview. Very well done as usual. Are there any questions from the members? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then we're happy to greet President Wilson and his team. Thank you for coming before us today.
Thank you very much, Chair Smith and members of the committee. First of all, it is always an honor to come and talk about Morgan State University and all of the things that are underway to ensure the continual progression and elevation of the national treasure, Morgan State. I certainly want to thank Governor Moore and former Governor Hogan for their support of higher education and for Morgan in particular this year. And we extend equal appreciation to the General Assembly. Madam Chair and members of the committee, we have put before you a fairly extensive overview of all the things going on at Morgan, so I'm not going to even attempt to read any of this to you, but just to kind of highlight a few bullets. First of all, we are in the middle of really the most transformational period in the 156-year history of Morgan State University. We're in our 156th year, and as such, you have heard from the analysts that we have historic highs all over the place. We have an historic high in freshman enrollment, never seen these numbers in 156 years. We have historic highs in total enrollment, over 9,300 students. We have increased that enrollment by 26% just over the last 2 years. As we look now to position Morgan for the next 10 years, we put in front of you a plan that we think will almost complete the transformational era in the way in which we have envisaged this. The we meaning the Board of Regents at Morgan, chaired by the Honorable Kwesi Mfume, the President and our team, our senior team, the faculty, the students, you as elected officials, our alumni, everyone has kind of weighed in on how we see this institution by the year 2030, Transformation Morgan leading the future. We have identified 6 goals that we will basically be pursuing doggedly. Everything starts at Morgan with enhancing student success. And we devote a lot of time, a lot of resources to ensuring that it happens. We also want to recognize the incredible faculty that we have at Morgan. I think it is the most diverse faculty amongst public higher education institutions in this state. About 50% of our faculty are Black, 50% other, including 26% white, 10% international, about 5% Latinx. We really have not only the most diverse faculty in the state of Maryland, but one of the most diverse faculties you'll find in the nation. We also are determined to continue on the course that this particular legislature actually designated us to be in 2016 as the state's preeminent public urban research university. Following my colleague, President Gerald from UMB, I have to say that Morgan is the only comprehensive doctoral research university in the city of Baltimore, and that we offer everything from the baccalaureate degree to the PhD. As such, we are offering now close to 150 academic degree programs. We understand at Morgan that we have to devote some serious attention and resources to improving our infrastructure, which, of course, some of that bubbled up with regard to the latest audit. And by the way, we had 10 findings. That was down significantly from previous periods where the university has had 24 or so. So tremendous progress has been made. But what Morgan is trying to do in this space of infrastructure is to catch up for 83 years of underinvestment on the part of the state when the state purchased the campus in 1939 and made it public. But we've had those infrastructure challenges for decades. And of course, we are an anchor institution in the city of Baltimore, and we are expanding our presence internationally. And so with that in mind, we certainly are experiencing some growing pains, some good pains. But we had planned for a 10,000 student population at Morgan, perhaps around 2028. But things aligned. We had just an incredible period in this country of social reckoning, where students who wanted to go to college wanted to go to a different type of place, a place that they perceived to be welcoming, a place where they felt they belonged, a place that they felt they could basically grow in a different kind of way. And Morgan benefited from that. And as a result, this growth has kind of caught up with us during an era in which we had not kind of prepared for the residential facilities, and so we're catching up. We just opened a new 670-bed residential facility in August. We are building another 600-bed facility that will open in the summer of 2024, and the board has authorized yet a third facility that we hope to have completed by 2027. In addition, we're taking off several of our legacy buildings, gutting them and rebuilding them anew. And we're doing that starting in May of this year, and we're going to do a 15-month renovation process. We have to move those students off campus. They will return in fall of 2024. And so everywhere you look at the institution around Morgan, we are growing, we are expanding, we are in service to the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. One of the things I would say is that our students at Morgan are amazing. Just some of the most brilliant students you will encounter. They are winning everywhere. They are winning on the world stage from really competitive contests, from the Amazon Web Services to Zillow to Goldman Sachs. Our students at Goldman Sachs have a 28 college competition there, and for the last couple of years, our students have placed very, very high, second and third place amongst those 28 groups, and they have brought to the institution themselves their academic competition. So we're very, very proud of our young students and the way they are comporting themselves on world stages across the country. Likewise, we've had numerous faculty members at Morgan to be elected as national fellows in some of the national associations, AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and others. And Madam Chair, I was kind of shocked out of my wits this year when I received a notice that I had been elected into the National Academy of Arts and Sciences in the country as well. And so we are just very, very pleased with the recognitions that are coming our way. I have to say as well that we made another historic appointment this year in that I appointed as our Vice President for Athletics and Associate Director Ms. Dina Freeman Patton, becoming the first woman to lead Division I athletics in Morgan's history, and one of only a few women to basically be ADs in the country, and so we're very, very pleased with that. We are elevating our research productivity at Morgan. When I arrived, we were being awarded about $29 million a year. But as of last year, we were up to $74 million. We are also now approaching about 80 doctoral degrees a year, and we think we are on track to be elevated from a high research institution to a very high research institution within the next few years, and join the ranks of Johns Hopkins and College Park, and as of last year, UMBC as the only very high research institutions in the state of Maryland. And so there's plenty more to say, but let me move to the questions that the analyst has put before us. We have been asked to respond to the strategies, the retention strategies that we have in place to accommodate the very large growth in our enrollment in a relatively small period of time. And so the analyst did reference that last year we accepted 85% of the students that applied to us because I'm not sure if the committee is understanding this in context. I went on the MHEC website to provide you with a little context. And so here are the percentages of acceptances by the other public institutions in the state. Morgan at 85%, UMBC 81% of all students that applied, Towson 71% of all students that applied, Salisbury 91% of all students that applied, Bowie 86%, Frostburg 88%, UMES 86%, and College Park 36%. So Morgan is not an outlier here. We are seeing that as a result of the unbelievable shift in the way colleges are assessing college readiness. It's no longer just whether you had a high test score. Matter of fact, it's test optional, and we are applying a much more comprehensive approach to college acceptances, and you can see so are the other institutions as well. So not an outlier, but indeed a part of the movement of higher education in this space. In addition, we have programs in place to ensure that the students that we are bringing to the institution will stand the greatest chance of success. We have a couple of summer bridge programs. We have financial aid optimization. What that means is that we just don't load students up with financial aid in the freshman year, and by the time they get to the junior year, they have exhausted all those sources and they don't have any more available to them, and then they begin to drop out. We also are looking at ways of investing more in our retention counselors. We take a different kind of approach to retention at Morgan, and as a result, we won 4 national awards across higher education. We introduced the concept of intrusive advising, and then we defined that. And about 8-9 years ago, we went to a method that is closely akin to a social worker, where we have about 30 retention counselors on the campus. Each one of them has a caseload, and they literally knock on student doors. They're very intrusive. We have a system in place where if students don't go to class, the Gates Foundation invested in us heavily to put this system in place called Starfish, where if I missed a class, I'll get a text from my professor saying, "David, where were you yesterday? You weren't here." And if I don't go 3 times, then something's going to happen where the next text I get is going to be from a counselor saying, "You need to come and see me because we need to find out what's going on." And so it's that kind of way in which we minister to the needs of our students, and therefore we're investing in those kinds of strategies going forward. You also on page 7, you asked me to discuss the growing out-of-state student population at Morgan, and all I can say here is why is that happening? Well, it's happening because the brand of Morgan has been elevated substantially across the nation and indeed across the world. But at the same time, over the last 2 years, we have increased the percent of in-state students from Maryland, 3% year before last, 3% more this year. But one of the things that struck me when I arrived in our state 12 years ago from Wisconsin was that Maryland is the number 1 or close to it in the nation in terms of being a net exporter of college students. What that means is that you have every institution in the country that is coming into Maryland, and those students are leaving Maryland more than the institutions in Maryland are attracting students from other states. And so therefore you become a net exporter of your talent. And so certainly we understand that, and many of the out-of-state students that we are attracting, they are coming disproportionately from the Northeast, and we've done studies in terms of our alumni and where they reside when they finish, and so about 70% of them then reside within the catchment area. And so while they're coming from out of state, we have a disproportionate number of them who actually stay here and become a part of the tax base in the state. But we are looking at ensuring that even with a shrinking number of high school graduates coming out of Maryland, and even as a net exporter of students, that Morgan is going to be there as a possibility for students who want to stay in this state and receive a top-notch world-class education. You also asked me to comment on the new positions. I can make this real brief. We are currently recruiting for about 30 positions at Morgan. And what I would want the committee to understand is that when you're recruiting for faculty positions, it really takes about a year to fill a position because faculty members, almost to a faculty member, they do not leave in the middle of a semester. So you can't start recruiting in September and have a faculty member who's already a faculty member at another institution drop everything in November and then come to your institution. So it typically takes a year, and many faculty members don't like to start even in the middle of the year. They like to start in the fall. So we would start a recruitment process in the summer with the expectation that that person would be on board by the next fall. And so these are proceeding in the way in which we thought they would. We should address what efforts, if any, will be taken to not burden students in the proposed medical school. And Madam Chair, I want to just say two quick things here. Number one is when we went down the path of affiliating with the entity to create a for-profit medical school, in terms of the economy, it was in a different place. Inflation has, of course, taken root. And even at that point, the proposed tuition was somewhere around $48,000 to $50,000 a year. Now, in order for that model to work, it's up to $55,000. This is a concern for us. And so, as such, I would ask the state to strongly consider having the medical school at Morgan to be a public medical school that would be supported by state funds, that would reduce the tuition substantially, that would serve the goal for which has excited us in this state, and that is to produce more primary care physicians, of which we don't see an abundance of that coming out of our schools right now, and of course to address the paucity, the extreme paucity of African American physicians and African American male physicians. In 1974, the data show that there were approximately 524 African American males in medical schools in this country, and as of about 6 years ago, it was 514. And so we have made no progress, and the medical schools that are in existence, many of them don't have one single black person in the graduating class, and certainly scores of them have zero black males. And so this is really, really pushing us to bring in existence a medical school where we can produce primary and family care physicians that will serve spaces where they're just not getting the kind of health care. So we think that this will solve all kinds of challenges in terms of cost, and those numbers that the analysts indicated in terms of, blacks accumulating, $250,000 in debt. It's serious, and unless we figure out a way to reduce that, it's going to continue to be the case. Should we go down this path, and we have received some pretty good positive endorsement in terms of this way of thinking, this would be the first medical school at a public HBCU in the country. The four that are in existence right now, all at private HBCUs, Howard University, Morehouse School of Medicine, Meharry, and Charles Drew in Los Angeles. That's it. Now, we are still moving in this space where we have to anticipate that that may not happen, although we are hoping that it would. And so with that in mind, I have, of course, approached a donor who may or may not be interested in making a contribution to the institution to create an endowment fund where we may be able to use the return on that endowment if we stayed in this model to reduce some of the tuition, but it would not be a substantial reduction because you would need literally a $300-400 million endowment in order to bring that down substantially. So we see a good way forward here to be what I indicated initially. And then let's finally get to the audit findings, and I will, for the sake of time, address the repeats. There were, I believe, 4 repeats, which, of course, when you're up to 4, that's why we're having this conversation. And so the first one, finding 1, I can say that that particular finding is also the finding of all public institutions in Maryland, all public higher education institutions in Maryland. We all had the same finding and all had the same repeat finding. And so the only way this is going to go away is if the state legislature were to modify, we were told, the language of the way OLA is auditing this. So there are certain vendors out there, they have cornered the market in higher education, and we have really tried to get the vendor to supply the information that we need, but when they have 3,000 other schools, they're not going to change their entire model for Morgan State University. So in that connection, we have had a really great conversation with Chancellor Perman and the system, as we indicated to the auditors we would, and we would see if collectively public higher education in Maryland can have a conversation with the vendors saying, you have to supply this information not only to Morgan, but to all of the public higher ed institutions, and then we can hopefully get some support from the legislature to make that happen. So finding number 1 is not unique to Morgan and is not a repeat item to Morgan. With regard to finding number 2, the independent review of room and board adjustments, that has already been made, and we have fully documented that, and it is supported by source documents, and our internal audit department has indicated that they are satisfied with the justification that has been provided. With regard to finding 3, the independent review of residency status, quite frankly, we felt that we had closed this out before the auditors came forward. And here's what that means, is that we have a high number of students who apply to Morgan who, when they go online and complete the application, because they have to answer these 6 questions, I think that's a part of every application, and some of our students would answer one of those questions not correctly. And so the default position is, if that happens and the student is accepted, that student is accepted as an out-of-state student. And then when the student gets the letter, and the student may be, from Annapolis, would say, wait, I'm not an out-of-state student. You're billing me for out-of-state tuition. We said, well, you have to bring us this kind of documentation. So the student brings in the documentation, and we then look over the documentation, and we validate that the student is indeed an in-state student. So we change the student from out-of-state to in-state, and we have quite a few. So when the auditors come in and they look at the fact that, you have 800 of these changes, how are you justifying that student who you accepted as an out-of-state student is indeed an in-state student? We said, well, here's the process that we went through. They said, well, okay, so when you made this conclusion, then who verified that? Well, okay, it has to go to an independent verifier. Okay, well, then who verified the independent verifier? So it's like, so how far do we go with this, right? And so we went initially to the first step of that process, thinking that that was correcting this, but then I think that individual ended up leaving during COVID, and then it kind of rendered us back into space. But the bottom line is that we expect that this one will actually be tested in 30 days, that we have put in place. We're going to have to go to perhaps 2 physical people in order, we think, to ultimately win over the approval here. The first one verifying, and then the second one verifying the verifier. So that's where we are with regard to item 7. We went through a period at Morgan, unfortunately, where the crime was coming closer and closer to our campus. Indeed, we had a couple of incidents on campus, and we did not have a security force. We had a police force, an armed police force. And so I really authorized the university to seek an emergency procurement. We followed our procurement guidelines. We ended up with a emergency procurement company. But then that emergency procurement ended, and then COVID came, and we kept renewing the contract with the emergency entity before we got around to issuing the full-blown procurement. And so in this connection, the auditors were right. They indicated that we had eclipsed several $1 million without having gone through the official process and gotten the Board of Public Works approval. So they asked us to go and get retroactive approval from the Board of Public Works, which we did in December to a unanimous vote. And so, Madam Chair and the committee, those are my comments. With regard to the recommendations, recommendation 1, we agree to that recommendation, and they're withholding up to $500,000 because we fully expect to be in full compliance when the auditors return. And then with regard to recommendation number 2, we agree to provide the requested report. And those are my comments.
Thank you so much, President Wilson, for your comments. And I also want to give a hearty welcome to former State Senator Joan Carter Conway, former chair of the newly constituted EED Committee.
Yeah.
But thank you for also being here.
Thank you so much. I'm merely sitting here to assist Dr. Wilson, who needs no assistance. But I also wanted to thank you when we were here before on the report that came out on historically black colleges, to thank you for your gracious introduction.
Of course. Thank you for being here. Like you said, he's capable and able, and he gave us a full report. And we thank you for the team, as well as you, sir, for being here. Are there any questions from the members? Seeing none, oh, do you have one, Vice Chair? Okay. Thank you so much for your time. We do have 2 other witnesses.
I just want to introduce for the record
please, my apologies.
Executive Vice President and Chief Finance Officer, Mr.
Monday.
Sidney Evans.
Great to see you again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to call up, I believe it's Jaron McCall, or Mackle. I apologize if I mispronounced. And Sandra Great. Is it just going to be Sandra today? Okay,
Yes,
great.
Jerron is not here.
Oh, Jaron, I apologize for saying that wrong. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Madam President and committee members.
Just chair, I'm not president.
Chair.
Nice promotion, though.
Okay. My name is Sandra Great. I've worked at Morgan State for over 19 years, and I am a member of the Ask Me Local 1885. And today I am accompanied by Stuart Katzenberg. Over the last 5 years, we have made real strides at Morgan. We have worked with the administration under Dr. Wilson's leadership to eliminate contractual employment for hourly staff, raised the minimum wage to $15 per hour, and seen significant increases in enrollment. However, we remain concerned about a number of outstanding issues that remain unresolved. The biggest issue is that we have been locked in negotiation since the beginning of the pandemic through today. We have multiple outstanding issues, but some of most serious include health, safety, vacancies, and wages. Like all public employees who worked straight through the pandemic, many of us got very sick with COVID. Morgan did take some key proactive approaches that were helpful, but they never could agree and sign off on health and safety standards. In early 2021, every member of the heating plant got sick with COVID. Bargaining team members and leader Casper McAllister died from COVID-19 after his infection. That we are still loggerhead about protecting employees' health broadly is not acceptable. Morgan isn't alone with these problems. The USM schools have refused to sign off on enhanced health and safety protocols as well, so we're not alone there. We can't let employees stall or refuse safety improvements. This is why we need your support to pass the binding arbitration, HB 380 and SB 218, so that employers can avoid and stall necessary changes in our contracts. I want to thank this committee for the long-time support of ASCME and our members. And I thank you so very much for taking the time to hear our concerns.
Thank you for your testimony. Our condolences in the loss of your team member. And thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the members today? Seeing none, Ms. Gray, thank you so much for your time and for your service to Marylanders.
Thank you.
And that concludes the bill hearing from Morgan State University. We'll be moving on to the last, budget hearing. The last budget hearing will be concerning MSDE headquarters, and we'll begin with our budget analyst, Laura Hyde.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Laura Hyde, and I am the budget analyst for MSD headquarters. Because the budget analysis provides a lot of detailed information about the agency's budget, I'm going to briefly summarize that information for you and then move on to the issues. So starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, the fiscal 2024 budget for MSD headquarters decreases by $13 million to $333 million, with net changes reflected in the general, special, and federal fund allowance. The agency also recently organized, which is discussed on page 4 of this analysis. If you'll please turn to page 11, Exhibit 5. This is the overview of agency spending. MSD headquarters budget includes the Office of the State Superintendent and other divisions, as well as 3 independent agencies budgeted under MSD headquarters: the Maryland Center for School Safety, the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center, and the Office for the Inspector General for Education. In the fiscal 2024 budget, these agencies all receive approximately $3 million for administrative expenses. The remaining allocation is for MSD headquarters budget, of which the majority of expenses are $132 million in federal funds for doors and $72 million for the Office of the State Superintendent. If you'll please turn to Exhibit 6 on page 13. This is the proposed budget. In the fiscal 24 allowance, operating expenses decreased by $10.2 million, including increases for $3 million for school safety evaluations, $1 million for hate crimes grants, and $3.6 million for the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, which is our state assessments. And there's also an offset decrease of $14 million across the agency for IT projects. So if you'll please turn to Exhibit 7. This is on page, I lost my page. It's on page 18. So this is the first issue. One of the most difficult problems facing states after COVID-19 school closures was learning loss, which is sometimes called COVID slide. Between fiscal 2020 and 2022, a total of $907 million in federal stimulus funding was allocated specifically for programs to address learning loss for Maryland students. And some of these distributions included $351 million by the federal government directly to LEAs, local education agencies, as part of a required set-aside for ARPA ESSER 3 funds, $271 million from the Maryland General Assembly as part of Chapter 357 of 2021. This was distributed based on full-time enrollment and free and reduced price meal enrollment. $100 million allocated from the Coronavirus Relief Fund using Title 1A percentages, and $185 million in ARPA ESSER funds distributed by MSDE as part of the Maryland LEADS program, which is a non-competitive grant program designed to overcome learning loss and narrow achievement gaps. If you'll look on page 8, This table shows program funding fell primarily into three categories, with $378 million on student-focused programs, $146 million on educator-focused programs, and $32 million for local school system programs. If you'll turn over to the next page on Exhibit 9, this table shows the distribution of Maryland Leads funds compared to the allocation LEAs would have received if Maryland Leads grants were distributed using the 2020 Title I-A shares. 5 LEAs with the highest percentage of Title I-A students, Baltimore City, Prince George's, Montgomery, Baltimore, and Anne Arundel counties were underfunded using this formula by a total of $85 million, with the remaining LEAs receiving more than they would have if this was distributed using Title I-A shares. And then if you turn to page 21, this is Exhibit 10. This table shows the distribution of LEADS funds to LEAs in actual dollars per student compared to the average per student, which would have been approximately $214 based on the student enrollment in the school year 2021-2022. 16 LEAs received a higher amount than the average, and 8 LEAs received less than the average. Of the 5 counties with high percentages of Title I-A students, all received less than the average of $214 per student. So with these concerns in mind, DLS recommended that MSD report on the Maryland Leads program and how the agency intends to measure program impacts on student learning loss. If you'll please turn to page 23, this is Exhibit 11 on personnel vacancies. Since fiscal 2020, MSDE has had persistently high numbers of vacancies, particularly in the Office of the State Superintendent and DOORS. This problem was exacerbated by COVID-19 hiring freezes and the demands for additional staff for blueprint programs. This table shows the 199 vacancies as of January 2023, not including an allowance in 2024 of 13 additional regular positions and 23.5 contractual positions. So with these concerns in mind, DLS recommended that MSD continue to report on their personnel vacancies. If you'll turn to page 24, this is Exhibit 12 on MSDE audit findings. A January 2023 audit by the Office of Legislative Audits documented continuing concerns regarding MSDE's accounting practices. Although MSDE did resolve some of these matters in a previous audit, OLA found 9 additional concerns that warranted agency action. These included cybersecurity, enrollment, grantee supervision, and procurement. And of particular concern in this audit is that MSDE did not necessarily ensure that LEAs use blueprint for Maryland's future funds in accordance with the state law. So with this concern in mind, DLS recommends restrictive language for a report to continue monitoring the agency's progress towards resolution of these findings. If you'll look on page 26, Exhibit 13, this talks about virtual learning, and as part of a JCR request, MSD reported on efforts on virtual learning and how that can support daily instruction in college and career readiness. This table just shows a summary of those actions and costs, which totaled $10.6 million. So DLS recommends continued reporting on virtual learning. If you'll please turn to page 29, this is Exhibit 14 on reporting delays. In calendar 2022 and 23, MSDE was responsible for 57 reports, annual reports, and 21 JCR reports, not including monthly reports, back of the bill requests with other agencies, and other reports written by independent agencies. Approximately 40% of these reports were not turned in on time, so DLS asked just that MSDE comment on these delays. The remainder of this analysis includes information on school safety grant funding, MFRs for the independent agencies, and more details on the audit findings. The recommended actions start on page 30. This concludes my presentation, and I stand for questions.
Are there any questions from the members? Thank you so much for your presentation. Now we will re-welcome Superintendent Chaudhry and his full team that may be supporting your response today. Great to see you again, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith
Good
and
afternoon.
members of the subcommittee. With me here today is Justin Dayhoff, Assistant State Superintendent. I'm grateful to be here today discussing the MSDE headquarters budget. We embrace the opportunity to discuss that analysis and to shed light on key MSDE programs and services, particularly as we emerge from the pandemic. I want to start today on the critical component of the analysis and one we are deeply focused on at the department, staffing and vacancies. As the analysis notes, MSD began reorganization efforts this year. Dating back to the previous administration, DLS and the Assembly had recommended updating our chart of accounts and reorganizing and modernizing the structure of the department. MSD immediately embarked upon this work when I began last year, and it was much overdue. MSD had program codes active that correspond to Race to the Top and other programs that have not existed in nearly a decade. I cannot begin to emphasize enough, without exaggeration, the dire state of MSDE systems and operations. I am proud of the deep commitment of MSDE staff as they navigate the change and navigate the increase in work responsibilities with the blueprint for Maryland's future and navigate a department that lacked the systems and structures to set them up for success. As MSD did with its early childhood analysis, MSD likewise concurs that the department experienced an increase in vacancies over the last several years. Those vacancies do not come as a surprise, as a state hiring freeze that was lifted in December 2021, halfway into my first year, persistently low state salaries, the abolishment of special appointment positions, and the provision of contractual rather than permanent positions generated an increase in MSDE vacancies. Those vacancies are felt harder at MSD given the year-over-year reductions in permanent positions overall in the decade leading to the start of my first term, my first term last year, with new and increasing requirements and obligations like the blueprint for Maryland's future. Let me be clear. At peak, MSD had 257 regular PIN vacancies during my first year. Natural attrition will occur throughout the year and as part of an administration transition. Further, the analysis does not account for the start dates of hired employees who have not yet started, but who have been hired. As of December 2022, the State Board of Education meeting, MSD had 169 vacancies, 42 of which are indoors. MSD intends to be significantly below 100 vacancies by July 1, 2023, and subsequently close vacancies fully by fiscal year end 2024. I will highlight now what I have done to address staffing and vacancy in the short term while making sure MSD does not experience a vacancy issue again in the long term. I spoke last year at our headquarters budget hearing about my approach to business operations, the development and implementation of what I call the core services team approach. Collectively, a core service team roles represent the necessary central department functions upon which each program office relies to operate and includes an IT partner for information technology support, a talent partner for human resources support, a business services partner for support with procurement and contracts, and a planning and budget analyst for budget and finance support. This group of department offices ensures MSD programs and program teams can successfully execute their responsibilities and provide excellent service to Maryland's children and families. Those teams are designed to work collaboratively together to provide hands-on customer service to MSDE program staff and proactively identify and resolve program needs related to human resources, contracts and procurement, information technology, and fiscal and budgetary matters. Core services teams are simultaneously designed to move work forward and serve as a fail-safe so operations workflows do not stall or fall through the cracks. I designed all core services teams to roll out last year, but hiring delayed full implementation. The core services teams, when first established, included the HR, IT, procurement, and contract management core services team members in some capacity. Planning and budget analysts were not hired yet. Hiring challenges are not unique to MSDE. And at the same time, personnel challenges are, as my team knows, not a reason for falling short of expectations or failing to get the work done. That being said, it has taken time and effort, and we are still trying to recruit and fully fill to implement our new HR structure and to begin to see that structure operate in the way and with the rigor and consistency of my vision. No doubt, the core services team talent partners have become pivotal in reducing the MSDE vacancy rate. I recognize that my aim to level up student achievement, close gaps for historically underserved children, and successfully implement the blueprint for Maryland's future relies on high-quality, efficient, and successful department business operations and continuity. Only through that work can we ensure that staff are set up to succeed. MSD is doubling down on its recruitment efforts structurally and in the tools the department uses with its recruitment teams. Prior to the current MSD administration, the department relied on posting vacancies on the state of Maryland recruitment platform, Job Apps, that has limited features to promote or highlight MSD positions. The jobs posted on Job Apps automatically transfer to online platforms. However, MSD did not adopt any additional strategic recruitment and promotion strategies to attract candidates. Instead, the department was waiting for candidates to find us. MSD also relied on in-person job fairs that stopped for nearly 18 months during the pandemic. During this time, MSD had limited success with virtual hiring fairs. Since the end of the hiring freeze in December 2021, MSD commenced an aggressive recruitment outreach using LinkedIn, Twitter, ZipRecruiter, and EdWeek, a leading platform for education jobs, in addition to the Maryland State Recruitment Portal and Indeed.com. MSD has utilized specialty job posting platforms for hard-to-recruit positions such as architects and accessibility specialists. Many in-person job fairs have resumed since March 2022. MSD is participating in as many job fairs as possible. MSD has also taken on targeted approach to recruit and retain particularly hard-to-staff areas. I want to acknowledge the MSD requested compensation study of the Division of Rehabilitation Services, or DOORS, positions and the role that DBM played in this effort. We appreciate DBM's direct support of my request to conduct a compensation study for one of our largest vacancy areas, rehabilitation specialists in the DDS and VR programs in the Division of Rehabilitation Services. Hiring in DOORS after the study was not as immediate as MSD wanted. It took a year for me to get approval, in part to make the changes in the type of federal clearance associated with these positions, and the new 2 to 3 month clearance time once MSD has identified a candidate for hire. MSD reached out to and met with our federal congressional delegation, and those candidates are now moving through the federal process more quickly. I've included that letter with my written testimony. Thanks to the off-cycle compensation study of DOORS positions and a new grant partnership with the University of Maryland to investigate a fee-for-service model while allowing the university to directly qualify and serve families, the initial programmatic data in DOORS are promising. The DOORS waitlist has stabilized in a very long time. That has not happened going back to before the pandemic, and DOORS has actively reopened its Category 2 waitlist for the first time since 2018, and will by the end of 2022 have pulled all individuals off the waitlist from 2017. Moreover, these talent efforts are moving us forward. For example, as of August 2022, MSD had over 115 DOORS vacancy. MSD now has 39 DOORS vacancies in this area, including 27 positions in DOORS awaiting final federal clearance. Essentially, we will zero those vacancies out this year. 0 of the remaining 39 vacancies will be in the rehabilitation specialist positions. Is it as fast as I want or as we need? No. But 1.5 years into my term, MSD is moving in the right direction and the data to support that progress. Similarly, as MSD discussed in its early childhood hearing, this year's department budget proposal reflects the recruitment and retention efforts also targeted in early childhood, including the conversion of 15 contractual positions to permanent positions in fiscal year 24 because we identified licensing specialists, a particular source of higher than average turnover. Licensing specialists in the Division of Early Childhood are responsible for inspecting, credentialing, and providing assistance to childcare providers to ensure safe childcare. These positions currently have a ratio as low as 56:1 and as high as 78:1. A comprehensive comparative analysis of childcare licensing position indicates that low compensation as well as restrictive and outdated minimum qualifications were the biggest issues impacting the hiring and retention of these positions. I proposed a 2-grade salary increase, about 12%, to employees in the licensing job series, which increases the starting salary to trainees to $60,000 starting July 1, 2023. The proposal has been approved by DBM and is included in MSD's fiscal year 24 budget allowance. For example, MSD's most recent DEC enrollment that concluded last week resulted in 246 qualified candidates scheduled to be interviewed for 18 licensing specialist vacancies during the week of February. As I said in my last hearing, this vacancy will also be closed by the end of March. MSD is unwilling to allow rigid staffing guidelines and position availability to slow down the work of the department. MSD is growing, on the move, and leading the charge, and MSD is continuing to raise the bar on performance while seeking ways to reinforce and strengthen department personnel structures. MSD's recruitment and staffing initiatives and its vacancy status were reported to the General Assembly in October 2022 as required by the Joint Chairman's information request. Beyond positions and the work of our core services teams and talent partners, our procurement and contracts team also went right to work. In an ideal state, this team is being proactive, working ahead all the time, but we had to attend to retroactive contracts and procurements that were not in line with state law or policy. For example, this year MSD cleared out and cleaned up 26 retroactive contracts. Now, retro contracts are no more. Emergency contracts are only used in necessary and appropriate circumstances, and MSD programs have systems and processes on which to rely for sourcing support and following clear document policies. These include the provision of consistent methods of evaluating and scoring RFPs, assessing conflict of interest, and ensuring all processes with DO-IT, DGS, and BPW are followed appropriately. More recently, and after multiple recruitments, MSD was able to hire core services team planning and budget analysts and fill out most of the core services team assignments. Each core services team planning and budget analyst is responsible for ensuring and maintaining the fiscal health of a corresponding division and office and its related programs. These planning and budget analysts and supporting fiscal coordinator roles process budget alignments and transaction journal entries, conduct audit and other fiscal research, manage program cost account numbers, and liaise directly with the accounting branch. So far, MSD has cleared out a backlog of more than 2,500 invoices, created a new chart of accounts, program code structures, zero-based the department's budget, deactivated and cleared out 3,000 outdated and unused program cost account numbers, audited and updated 10 years of grant actuals as it works to get current, caught up on an overdue USDA reporting submissions, and began to correct appropriation information for federal programs that have not had appropriation updated at least for years. For the first time since the start of my administration, our core services teams are fully operational and beginning to facilitate core department business operations as designed. I brought our newly established published guidance and service level agreements for the teams and attached the guidance to our written response for reference. Turning around systems and processes may not be flashy work, but from day one, I recognize that core department operations are pivotal, and I am ardently working to create clear and documented systems, policies, processes, and infrastructure. I am fully committed to making sure MSD runs like a well-oiled, efficient system where continued operation is not tied to a single person or role, but instead built into the fabric of MSDE as an organization. This corresponds as well to MSD's timely submission of Joint Chairman's report and Maryland State Agency reports. MSD acknowledges that it was behind this year, including some reports that were due from the previous administration. As the analysis noted, MSD has resolved all of the outstanding reports and has a new internal tracking system where MSD has already identified and mapped the next 12 months of reports, deadlines, assignments to ensure timely and proper submission. Ultimately, this work cannot be implemented fast enough. These are necessary positions, roles, and systems for core business operations, and we are working diligently and strive to improve MSD business operations, quality, and performance in year 2 and year 3. Parallel to my focus on operations, I was eager to get started right away on the instructional and content support of our local education agencies, including blueprint implementation. Maryland Leads was one pathway of this work. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Maryland Leads today. We respectfully, though strongly, disagree with the analyst's notes related to Maryland Leads, including the suggestion that Maryland Leads was not an investment in students and in learning loss. In the words of U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, in uplifting Maryland as a leader in implementing research-driven programs in the state, set aside funding in Maryland Leads, quote, "It is exciting to see Maryland leading the way through this new program that aims to use ARP funds in innovative ways. I'm heartened that Maryland Leads will help districts and schools both respond to the challenges posed by the pandemic and seize the opportunity our current moment offers to reimagine education. Maryland can build a better, stronger public education system for our students' future. I'm looking forward to seeing how these efforts, including using literacy strategies grounded in the science of reading, investing in supports for educators, diversifying the educator workforce, and developing high-quality community schools can expand educational excellence and opportunity for more students in the state, end quote. First, let me be clear. MSD does not directly fund students, ever. That is not how the state education agency works, as MSD funds local education agencies who then deliver programs and services to students. Service delivery to improve student performance takes many forms, including the training of teachers and other LEA personnel. Education research points to a host of factors in school and largely out of school that contribute to a student's success. The evidence on classroom-level impact is clear. The biggest school-based factor influencing student outcomes is their teacher. Take, for example, the science of reading, a national movement related to literacy and student outcomes for which Maryland is already playing catch-up. The Maryland LEAD strategy does fund training for all K-3 teachers, special education teachers, administrators, and reading specialists to be trained in the science of reading. For context, there was one state who did not experience learning loss in early literacy, Mississippi. What makes Mississippi unique? A statewide investment in the science of reading dating back to 2016 and ensuring that students are learning to read and are equipped to read by the time they complete third grade so they can read to learn from there out. Likewise, if local education agencies are unable to recruit and retain high-quality staff, MSD student outcomes suffer now and in the long term. To suggest Maryland LEAD's investments are not investments in student outcomes mischaracterizes the program and the initiatives contained therein. I encourage you to read more, as every research-based strategy included in Maryland LEADs contains examples of the existing research on the topic, policy implementation examples, and other best-in-class materials related to the evidence of these programs' efficacy. Moreover, the analysis makes the misplaced suggestion that funding students directly was the federal intent of the program, which is also not the case. Take, for example, United States Department of Education on federal guidance, which say, and I quote, "The American Rescue Plan provides vital resources to hire additional educators and school staff and to improve compensation to recruit and retain educators and school staff. School districts should act with urgency to keep schools open for in-person learning and ensure they do not waste this opportunity to make critical investments," end quote. The guidance goes on to list strategies for hiring and retaining qualified and effective educators and evidence-based and promising short and long-term strategies for addressing teacher and staff shortages that can be funded through ARP-ESSER, and examples of how ARP and previous relief funds are already being used to attract and retain teachers and staff. MSD also disagrees that the program in any way underfunded a local education agency, particularly high-needs LEAs. First of all, these funds were state set-aside funds and were not required to go to local education agencies at all. MSD could have retained the funds at the state directly for state-level work, but MSD decided to identify research-based strategies to tackle student outcomes and pass the funds to LEAs. In doing so, MSD gave a flat amount to all LEAs so that even small LEAs had resources necessary to make these programmatic investments. MSD then allocated funds based on a combination of LEA enrollment and the enrollment of economically disadvantaged students. These funds were not required by law to go to LEAs using Title I formula or to LEAs at all, per my previous comment. By using the allocation method MSD did, MSD set all LEAs up for success in utilizing these funds, as LEAs were impacted by the pandemic, not just LEAs with higher proportions of high poverty students. All other federal COVID pass-through resources were allocated using the Title I formula, leaving some LEAs without sufficient federal recovery resources. Further, MSD used a match incentive that generated more than $20 million in local investment to supplement the state's awards and build towards sustainability that will outlast these one-time funds. MSD lastly disagrees with the report language added to the analysis. MSD has no issue reporting and sharing publicly the efforts and outcomes of Maryland LEADs. However, the reporting suggests that somehow student outcomes will be fully realized by October 1, 2023, or that MSD would be able to make some sort of causal reference as to student outcomes on certain investments, which would require a control trial or other quasi-experimental research design, none of which could be completed by October 2023. Also, Maryland LEAD's implementation goes through September of 24, so the program will only be partly completed in October 2023. While some outcomes are demonstrable already, others take longer to take hold. I recognize that the Assembly may want immediacy, but like the blueprint and the timing for blueprint outcomes, setting proper expectations that map to how actual policy implementation occurs and when programs realize student outcomes is important. That being said, we included in our written analysis examples of LEA quarterly reporting, which has already begun and requires LEAs to show investment by strategy and focus area mapped to program goals, baseline data, and the tracking of program goals. I've included in our written testimony any additional requests as well as some examples of what I discussed here today, including our letters with our federal congressional delegations, data collection associated with Maryland Leads, and the federal guidance specifically associated with the American Rescue Plan State set-aside discretionary programs. Thank you once again for the opportunity to discuss these exciting and important issues here today. I stand ready for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Are there any questions from the members?
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate.
So I guess I will speak from here. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming. I just have a quick question on tip line. Right, so due to the return to in-person schooling, so 2021-2022 calls, the tip line increased from 148 to 768. Increase, and so there we go. And so you got bullying, cyberbullying up 13%, assault and intent to harm others up 12%, and then you have building safety and security that was at 5%. And so the audit that took place said that it found that the agency had not developed written policies and procedures for operations of a safe school Maryland tip line to ensure all tips were addressed in a timely manner. So I'm just wondering, what is the process that for this? Are we getting these policies written? Are things being taken care of to ensure that folks have what they need and they know what to do when they receive these tips?
Absolutely. Thank you, Delegate. So the Maryland Center for School Safety is here. I have brought my colleague up here from there. I am a board member and the chair of the Maryland Center for School Safety, but they're an independent agency who manages the tip line directly. But they have a response to that because that's been a focus of ours on the board when we found that finding to how to make sure that this is not an issue going forward.
Good afternoon. Joseph Pignataro, Deputy Director, Maryland Center for School Safety. The response to the Legislative Oversight's review, we are on track with that policy to be completed at the completion date, if not prior to.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions or feedback? Looks like you're free to move about the cabin. Thank you for your time.
Again, I'm not double booked today.
Yes. We do have a few folks that have signed up to provide oral testimony. Is Joseph Pignataro here? Oh, that's you. Sorry. You're here. You've spoken. We appreciated it. Jeannie Gunthrop, do you have any testimony to provide? Is that Douglas Roloff? I also have a Kate Bryan signed up. Yeah, you all can just come on down. Find a microphone. And I think Richard Henry signed up. Okay. Those are all the folks that signed up.
Chair Smith, thank you very much for allowing us. Delegate Forbes, Delegate Grist, Delegate Harris, and Delegate Mangione, thank you for letting us here today. I just want to let you know that I'm the Inspector General for Education. I just wanted to make sure I was available if you had any questions in regards to my office and any of the the budget issues that we were experiencing, some of the things that came up, and Ms. Hyde did a great job on her analysis. Just a couple things so we can highlight is that it did show that we had 4 vacancies. We have none, so I'm happy to say that.
Congratulations.
Right, we're very lucky. And that another clarification is I know that a number of agencies are listed as agencies under the umbrella of the Maryland State Department of Education, but the Office of the Inspector General only shares the word education with MSDE. So we are separate and apart. We are our own independent agency, and just want to make sure that's aware. We're responsible for investigating MSDE.
Right.
So it does create a conflict when some people think that we're actually under their umbrella. So I just want to make sure that you were aware of that and have any, if you had any questions about the office, I just want to make sure myself and my staff were available.
Delegate Forbes.
Yes. All our reports are public and they are posted on our website.
Any other questions from members? Any other comments from the panelists?
So good afternoon. Thank you for having us. So I am Kate Bryan. I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Center for School Safety. So our Deputy Director Dino answered your question about the tip line. So just here, if there's any other questions about the Center for School Safety, any of our programs, or anything related to our budget.
Any questions? Seeing none, and last but not least.
Oh, no,
You're just here for moral support.
Yeah.
You're there. You know, can you jump in? You're ready? Okay, thank you. Well, we appreciate everything that you're doing on behalf of public education here in Maryland, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.
Great. And we thank all of you. Thank you.
Of course. And there's no other oral witnesses signed up for today, so that brings today's budget hearing to adjournment.